good to see you out this morning, and a happy Mother's Day to everybody who is a mother and had a mother. Of course, we know that not every mother is perfect. In fact, I don't think there's ever been one that was, but they are good for us on the whole. There certainly are some have had mothers that were not good mothers, and that's sad, and we're so sorry to see that happen. But there are many good mothers in the Bible that are mentioned, and we can learn from them. In fact, today we want to talk about the fact that we need to study the Bible to learn what mothers ought to be. And so all you mothers, get ready. I'm going to tell you what you ought to have been. But that's not where we're going. But let's look at that, and we'll consider what mothers ought to be. First of all, mothers ought to be materially valued by all. So many times, the woman who chooses to be a mom, or especially one who chooses to be a stay-at-home mom that doesn't work outside the home, is ridiculed by many in society. Looked down on as though that's not a worthy thing to do with your life. And it's sad that that's the case, because motherhood is a high calling. And one to raise the children and take care of the home is something that is valuable to society, even though many times it's not recognized. They should be materially valued. We should recognize the material, monetary value of what mothers do. In Proverbs chapter 31 and verses 10 through 12, it says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband does safely trust her. She shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life." And it later says that her children will rise up and call her blessed. We'll recognize the value of what she has done. Well, what is the value of a mother? Every year, some try to compile some manner of measurement to try to say, well, what's it worth? What would it cost to hire somebody to do the things that a mom does? Insure.com does that every year. They've done it for 14 years now. And they call it the Mother's Day Index. And they find the different jobs that a mom does and what it would cost to hire somebody to do those things. In 2011, which was about the first year that they did this, they calculated it to be $61,436. That's really precise. But they said it was a $61,000 job that moms were doing. And I think specifically they're looking at the stay-at-home mom, the one that works outside the home and then still has to come home and do the dishes and take care of the laundry and all those things. That's a whole different category of work to have to perform on top of a regular job outside the home. But this one said this year for 2024, and I don't know, I guess they're probably looking at what the costs were in 2023 leading up to now. But it says this year it's $140,315. A lot of us could never afford to pay that, to hire somebody to do the jobs that mom does for free, in essence. And it breaks it down into accounting and auditing of finances and the household expenses and things, a baker, a chauffeur and shuttle driver, a child care worker, a cook, a teacher, a hairdresser, hairstylist, and cosmetologist, a judge, magistrate, and other judicial worker. You know, how many times does mom have to judge between the kids when they're fighting, right? Landscaping and groundskeeping, laundry worker, licensed practical and licensed vocational nursing, maids and housekeeping services, meeting and convention planning, mental health counseling, community and social service specialists, design services, personal care aides, private detectives and investigators. All of that added together a little bit, and it's, some of the, I think the largest category there is the child care worker, $32,000 for that, and then a smaller amounts like $400 or $500 for baking and hairdressing and hairstylist. So, but all of that put together, we think about, we don't realize how valuable the things that a mom does can be. And certainly there are some fathers out there that do some of those things too, but we're looking at mothers today. And motherhood is not about being perfect or being employee of the month or employee of the year. It's not about that. It's about seeing past the crumb-crusted furniture or a teenager's fluorescent pink hair to the joy in a toddler's potential and creativity capacity of a 15-year-old, and thinking about how can I instill in that child the confidence to go out into this world and to know that there's someone special in this world, but also the humility to know that so is everyone else that they come in contact with. So that they're confident but not arrogant, humble but not a walking mat, a mat to be walked over by other people. If we can do that, what an enormous contribution it makes to the world. And I would say even more important, a mother's role of teaching her children the love of God and the love of Christ. How important that is. That in and of itself is something that you can't put a dollar amount on. In fact, Jesus said, what will a man give in exchange for his soul? If he's gained the whole world and loses his soul, what does he profit? Well, I would paraphrase that and steal that to say, what do we profit if we gain the whole world but lose our child's soul? The value of that child's soul is so important that we can't value it in terms of dollars and cents even. So mothers should be materially valued by all. Mothers ought to be obeyed by children. Their children should obey them. Ephesians chapter 6 and verses 1 through 3. Paul says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And we sometimes relegate that teaching to a 7 or 8 year old, or maybe even we think, well, a 16 or 17-year-old. But what about on into life? Now, I know that we don't as adults do every single thing that our mother ever thought we should or said we should. We're adults and we have to make our own choices in life. But obeying the teachings that our parents, our mother, taught us are so important. Notice Deuteronomy chapter 21 and verses 18 through 21. Because this is teaching in the law of Moses to the Israelites about how important it is for children to continue to follow the teachings of their parents even as adults. Notice this. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, will not hearken to them. So this sounds, is this a toddler? Is this a 9-year-old? Is this a teenager? Who is this rebellious, stubborn son that's not listening to mom and dad? Well, let's look on ahead. Verse 19, he says, then shall this father and his mother lay hold of him, bring him out into the elders of the city, into the gate of his place. So that's where they did a lot of the judging before they had a real judge to sit there. the people of the city, the men especially of the city, would sit at the city gates. The elders of the city, the older men, would sit there, and if there was a problem, it would be brought before them, and they'd make a decision about it. And so they're supposed to bring him to that city gate, and they shall say to the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. Now notice this next part. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Now, this isn't a rebellious little kid. This is a grown man he's a glutton and a drunkard. And then all the men of his city shall stone him with stones, that he dies. So shall you put away evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Wouldn't that be something if we took 25-year-old, 30-year-old young men who were gluttons and drunkards and rebellious and stubborn and wouldn't straighten up and live right, and brought them to the city gates and then had them stoned to death? I bet a lot of them would straighten up, though. After the first 3 or 4, the others would say, you know what, maybe I should do a little better of that. And it'd sure be a message to the younger children who were still at home. Well, I don't want to be like so-and-so. Look what happened to him. Now, the law of Moses was a harsh law, but it got results. But no, even as adults, we need to have that idea of obedience to our mothers and thinking about the things that they taught us. And in the book of Proverbs, Solomon, talking to his son, talks to him about how the teachings of his mother were like jewels, gold chains around the neck. They were an ornament to be worn, to remember those teachings, keep those teachings, hold them close. Because mothers taught us the things that they taught us because they loved us and cared about us and wanted what was best for us. So mothers should be obeyed by their children. Mothers also ought to be tenderly loved by all. In Ruth chapter 1 and verses 14 through 17, this wasn't Ruth's flesh and blood mother. It was actually her mother-in-law. But notice what happens. As Ruth and Orpah, daughter-in-laws to Naomi, are told to go back home, they lifted up their voice and they wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, behold, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not entreat me to leave you or to return from following after you. For where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts thee and me. You know, it's interesting. I've heard that passage used in wedding ceremonies for a husband and a wife, talking about their devotion to one another and how they need to cling to one another and stay married and be one all the way till the day they die and everything. But this was a daughter-in-law. You know, usually mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, that's there's a fight there. They don't like each other. But that's not the case here. Ruth loved her mother-in-law, and she was going to be devoted to her to death. That is some tender love. That is devotion for sure. John chapter 19, verses 25 through 27. Here a case too where Jesus is talking to his mother, but the disciple he's talking to was not her son. But Jesus says to them, he sees his mother and the disciple standing by whom he loved in John 19 and verse 26. And he said to his mother, woman, behold, there's your son. He adopted John into the family to take his place. He knew he was dying. He couldn't take care of his mother, which is a son's responsibility. The firstborn son especially was responsible to make sure that mom was okay. We gather at this point in life, Joseph's not been heard from since Jesus was 12. Somewhere between the age of 12 and the time of 30 when Jesus began his ministry, we believe Joseph had died. His earthly father had died. Mary has no one to take care of her in her old age. And so Jesus, knowing he's dying and he's not going to be able to do it, he didn't even trust it to one of his younger brothers. But he chooses John, the disciple whom he loved, and he says to his mother, he's your son now. He's going to take my place. And then he says to John, behold your mother. And from that hour, that disciple took her into his own home. That says something about Jesus' brothers, that they weren't taking care of their mother perhaps, or maybe just that Jesus' command overrode what they would have done. Maybe they would have taken good care of their mother. But Jesus makes sure she's taken care of. One of the very last things that he does before he dies is make sure his mother is taken care of. She needs to be tenderly loved. And then a mother ought to be honored by her family. In Proverbs 31, verses 27 through 31, it says, she looks well to the ways of her household. She does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but you excelled them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. It's unfortunate. Not everyone had a godly mother. Not everyone had a virtuous mother. Not everyone had a mother who feared the Lord. But what a blessing it is when we do have a mother who fears the Lord. And they should be praised. Now, obviously, we know in the Bible there were some wicked mothers too. There were Jezebels who taught her son to worship Baal and to ignore the law of God. There were mothers like that. And God is not saying that we should hold those women up as the one to be followed and the example to learn from. Certainly not. But a mother who has feared the Lord, she's precious. She's to be honored. Matthew 15, 4 through 9, Jesus speaking there says, for God commanded, saying, honor your father and mother, and he that curses father or mother, let him die the death. Now, it's interesting. God didn't specify, honor your mother if she was a great mother. Honor your mother if she's a godly mother. We still honor them for being a mother, even if they fall far short of the goal that God set for mothers. Doesn't mean we honor the evil or the sin in their life or anything negative that they did, but we honor the good that they do. No mother is completely wicked and evil. All have done some good at some point, and we try to honor that as much as possible. We all know that we would not be here if it were not for a mother. It's impossible to come into this world. Only Adam and Eve ever entered this world without a mother. And so in spite of any wrongdoing that they may have done, we honor the fact that they brought us into this world and gave us the opportunity to have life and to be able to learn about God and to learn about His will for us, even if maybe they didn't teach us those things. Maybe they didn't train us. Maybe they weren't godly people. But we, at least because we were brought into this world, had the opportunity to learn about God. He says, you are to honor your father and mother. And the one that curses father or mother, let him die the death. The death in the Old Testament was always stoning. That was the way the law of Moses punished, always by stoning. So yes, mothers are to be honored by their family, by the children especially. Mothers ought to be encouraged by all. We need to encourage mothers to be good mothers and to be better mothers than they are already. Encourage them. It's tough. Being a parent is a difficult chore. Being a mother is hard work. I know when our children were little and Dawn was home with them all day and it was just her and them, and she really wanted to be able to talk to another grown-up, just to be able to have a conversation with an adult sometimes. It's difficult. Being wanted constantly. How many mothers talk about the fact they can't even get a chance to go to the bathroom without a little one tagging along, banging on the door to, where are you, Mommy? Let me, where are you at? Where'd you go? They can't have a moment's peace and quiet. Seems like every time if they say, y'all play quietly in your room for a minute. I got to lay down. I've got a headache or whatever. And then that's when the kids get even louder. It's always something. And they need our encouragement. And I think about especially the single moms. How hard it is for a single mom to raise a child. And we have a lot of single moms in the world today. And they need encouragement. They need somebody to help them and encourage them to be able to handle that task. They need support and encouragement. In Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 16, it says, He came to pass the day after that, he went into the city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and much people. Now when he came near the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And much people of the city were with her. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. And he said to her, Do not weep. And he came and he touched the bier, and they that bare him stood still. And he said, Young man, I say to you, arise. And he that had been dead sat up and began to speak. And he delivered him to his mother. What an encouragement to that mother. Now, I know you and I can't go raise a mother's dead son back to life. But notice the group of people. It says much of the people of the city was with her. She was a widow, and this was her only son. That's her whole family. That's her whole world now. But many of the people of the city were with her. They were encouraging her. They were trying to comfort her as she was mourning this great loss that she had. What a wonderful thing, though, Jesus did. Better than any encouragement that anyone else could have offered, to bring the boy back to life for his mother. But we need to encourage mothers while we can. So many times we wait until it's too late. We wait sometimes until people are dead and gone. I've heard this poem read at funerals to remind those who are still alive to practice this. It's called Give It Now. If you have a smile for mother, give it now. If you have a kindly word, speak it now. She'll not need it when the angels greet her at the golden gate. Give the smiles while she is living. If you wait, 'twill be too late. If you have a flower for mother, pluck it now. Place it gently on her bosom. Print a kiss upon her brow. What cares she when life is over for the flowers that bloom below? She will have her share up yonder, scattered at her feet galore. So many times we wait. We shower the dead with flowers and with kind words and honoring them and talking about how great they were, and we speak no evil of the dead. But what about while they're alive? Oh, we'll talk all sorts of bad things about them while they're alive. We won't give them a flower, the first flower, while they're alive. They can go get their own flowers. Why is it we do that way? What are we thinking? Maybe we're not thinking. We need to be encouraging mothers now while we can. Then we want to notice that mothers ought to be respected by all. There was a story told of a town that wanted to give an award for the greatest citizen. There were those who were businessmen that had done a lot for the community, hired a lot of people, brought in a lot of business into the community. There was a soldier who had risked his life. There was a doctor who had saved many lives. But the award went to the one who was the mother of those. They weren't the greatest. She was the greatest. They would not have been there but for her. In Exodus 21, verses 15 and 17, Moses writes there in the law, "And he that smites his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He that curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. We treat them with respect." Proverbs 23 and verse 22, he says, "Hearken to your father who begat you, and do not despise your mother when she is old." There was another story. It's told about some children who watched their parents with their aging grandparent. The aging grandparent was beginning to shake and having difficulty stumbling, had difficulties eating, would often make a mess, would turn over a glass, was not able to do the things that they were able to do before. And so the parents of the children of the grandparent, made a little wooden bowl and a little wooden cup so that it couldn't be broken. And they moved the grandparent off to a table by themselves where they wouldn't make a mess that would be seen by others, where they wouldn't have to see them food running down their chin because it disgusted them. And they did many other things like that. But after a while, they noticed the children playing one day. And the children had a piece of wood, and they were carving on it. And the parents asked the children, what are you doing there? What are you making? They said, "Well, we're making a wooden bowl for you when you get old." Children learn quickly. Do not despise your mother when she is old. The way we treat our parents may be the way our children treat us. That's a hard one for us sometimes. It's a hard one for me sometimes too. It's difficult, but we need to do right. And then finally, we want to notice that mothers ought to be supported physically, emotionally, and spiritually. In 1 Timothy 5, 3 through 4, Paul writes to Timothy, "Honor widows that are widows indeed. If any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home and to repay their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God." So first and foremost, children are to take care of their aging mother, and especially a widow. But what if she doesn't have any children and she's a widow? She doesn't have any husband? Well, she doesn't have a way to make a living. 1 Timothy 5 verses 9 through 10 says, "Let not a widow be taken into the number under 80 years old, having been the wife of one man, well reported of for good works, if she has brought up children, if she has lodged strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, if she has diligently followed every good work. So if she's been a good woman in her life, and she's done good works, and now she's older and she's a widow, the phrase, be taken into the number, is a phrase to indicate that the church would take care of her. If she did not have children to take care of her, and she was a widow, she didn't have a husband to take care of her, and she needed someone to take care of her, the church would take care of her. That was actually the first thing that the church had a fight about. In the beginning of the book of Acts, they were daily taking food to the widows to make sure that they were being fed, and one group of widows was being neglected. They weren't getting fed every day. So that was the first thing. There was a disagreement. Hey, how come these widows aren't getting taken care of? And so the apostles picked out 7 men in that church, and they said, it's your job to make sure all the widows get fed. That was their first task. But the trouble that came, because some of the widows were not being taken care of. When a widow needs to be taken care of, and she's been a righteous woman, it's the church's place, if she doesn't have any family of her own to do it, to take care of her. Mothers, how special they are. They should be materially valued. They should be obeyed by their children. They should be tenderly loved. They must be honored. They must be encouraged. They must be respected and supported. If you're here and perhaps you did not treat your mother with the respect you should have, maybe you need to repent of that. Maybe there are other mothers that you're belittling them instead of encouraging them. Instead of helping them, you're harming them. Maybe you haven't been treating mothers the way that you should. Maybe you're a mother and maybe you haven't been living as righteously as you should. Maybe you need to repent of that. Be closer to God. If you're here and you have a need to respond to God's invitation for any reason, please do so as we stand and as we sing.
All of my